Hi, I'm Andrew from Batch Brewing Company, and on this episode of Beerducation, we're going to talk about IPAs. The IPA, or India Pale Ale, is a style that has constantly changed and evolved over the years. The most common story of this style dates back to the 1780s. This is when the beer would be brewed in England to send to India for the troops over there. The East India Trading Company needed a beer that could last the 6-month voyage without spoiling before it got there. In the interest of preservation, they had a higher alcohol content and more hops, which created a higher bitterness level. Pale bitter beers were being brewed in England for some time before they started to get exported to India. The first mention appeared in the Sydney Gazette in 1829, which was an advertisement for East India Pale Ale. But similar to the story of pale ales, the IPA journey jumps across the pond to America, where it really starts to take off. And fast forward to the 1970s, all the way over in the state of Oregon, the Department of Agriculture had a hop breeding program, and they developed Cascade. And initially, there was virtually no interest in this hop. They prepared the hops, and they stored them for nearly 3 years, where they were almost all just thrown out. But the Cascade hop was saved, because in 1975, Anchor Brewing Company released their Liberty Ale, which used the Cascade hop very generously, as opposed to the classic pale ales and IPAs that we see in England. Fast forward again to 1983, Bert Grant from Yakima Brewing and Malting released the first American beer with the name IPA. And these early pioneers using Cascade formed the inspiration in the 90s for what soon became a style of its own, the West Coast IPA. So key releases of this style: in 1993, Swami's IPA from Pizza Port in San Diego. Then in 1994, Vinny at the Blind Pig Brew Pub released his. And in 1995, Lagunitas released theirs. And this started a tidal wave of massive West Coast IPAs with big hop flavor and bitterness. And in 2000, Vinny from the Blind Pig Brew Pub started Russian River and released his massive beer, Pliny the Elder, which is now a new style called Double IPA, and this beer is now considered the flagship of Double IPA. And Russian River didn't stop there. They now also release Pliny the Younger, a massive 10% Triple IPA, which is only available for 2 weeks out of the year, and some line up at their brew pub from 6 a.m. to try and get a taste. I was one of those people, and I unfortunately missed out. But the East Coast, not to be left behind, breweries like Dogfish Head, my personal favorite, Harpoon, Victory, and Goose Island were all busy creating their own versions of this style. But it was at the Alchemist Brewery in Vermont where the East Coast answer to the West Coast IPA was created, the New England IPA. And what makes New England IPA different from the West Coast IPA is that it has a softer mouthfeel and what we all know and love now today, that haze. But as with all IPAs, nothing catches on straight away. So in 2004, Heady Topper was released, and in 2010, Hill Farmstead started brewing their version, which is more juicy and more hazy than Heady Topper. And these New England IPAs were starting to get people excited about this style, but it wasn't until 2014 to 2017 where the real wave of New England IPAs started, and now we call that the Haze craze. And much like bandwagons, the Haze Train well and truly left the station. Boop, boop. Jump aboard, everybody, it's time to get on the Haze Train. Boop, boop. Breweries like Trillium and Treehouse in Massachusetts, other half in New York, and Tired Hands in Pennsylvania, all got on the Haze craze. And these breweries' popularity significantly increased specifically from this style. And the Haze Train turned into a plane.
Astro Train, take off!
And brought the Haze craze to Australia, and now it's well and truly around the world. And now let's look at some beers that exemplify these styles. The first beer we're going to talk about is the Green King IPA, which is an English IPA. So this is more malt forward, using English pale malts. The use of English hops lend a more earthy and spicy hop aroma to it. This style would be a lot closer to what the original version of IPA was. This uses English ale yeasts, which it gives it more of a fruity character, like apple and pear, which is quite different from the American IPAs. And here we have West Coast IPA. Typically, these styles as they started were darker in color, but we'll see here in a second that they're actually a bit lighter now. And that is an evolution of the West Coast IPA over time. And as you can see, this is a bit lighter than Green King. And over the evolution of time, more pale malts were used. In a West Coast IPA, you're getting big hits of Cascade. Most of the hops are grown on the West Coast of America, and you get citrusy and piney characters. Lighter body style, very easy drinking. And the style has evolved even more so. Batch's West Coast IPA is a little lower in alcohol to suit the Australian climate. And now the next style is the double and triple IPA. So these are bigger, boozier versions of the West Coast IPA with more flavor, more hop character, and also a bit more malt backbone to help balance it out. But triple IPAs with their high ABVs and huge amount of hops need more malt complexity in order to balance this beer out. So you can see it's a bit darker, but the malt, the hops, and the alcohol all combine together to make a very nice, smooth tasting beer that you want to have another sip of. And now we're going to talk about black IPA. It's a variation on the West Coast style that started in the 1990s, and it can also be referred to as Cascadian Dark Ale. While the use of darker malts make it black, it still shouldn't have any burnt or roasted characters to it. And black IPAs were really popular in the early 2000s, but they're a bit harder to find now. It's a great beer with great malt and hop complexity to it. I personally really enjoy these, which is why we brew them at small batch. But yeah, they're hard to find. And last but not least, hazy IPAs. And this is Mountain Culture's Be Kind Rewind, Most Deaf, a great local example of this beer.
Okay.
And New England IPAs can also be referred to as hazy or juicy. And while many people are looking for that beer to be super hazy, the haze factor actually can vary from beer to beer. And that doesn't necessarily indicate the quality of the beer. So with these styles, you get a lot more fruity characters from the hops, and typically hops are added later in the brewing process to give it more aroma and less bitterness. And this style is best drunk as fresh as possible. While hops are a preservative, the juicy hop flavors can actually deteriorate pretty quickly. While you might want to get some really great international New England IPAs, because of that freshness factor, you should definitely look for what your local brewery is doing. Well, folks, that concludes our beer education on the style of IPA. We hope you learned something, and go out and try a few from your local brewery.